Hey, everybody, this is Brett Ingram, and this is the optYOUmize podcast, the show that helps entrepreneurs build their dream business and dream life. Today, we're talking with Salvatore Tirabassi, Managing Director of CFO Pro Analytics, empowering emerging and family owned businesses through strategic finance. He has degrees from Harvard and Wharton, 24 years of experience, including venture capital and fractional CFO. I'm super excited because I know one big challenge a lot of businesses face is financing, how to get enough capital to be able to realize their vision. So with that, welcome, Salvatore. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Hey, Brett, thank you so much. I'm really excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, I am too. I am too. I mean, even in sort of the prelim, we were talking, I was getting excited about it. So I have a lot of questions I want to ask you, but can we start off with your background? I'm curious to know, you grew up in Brooklyn. So how did you start your career? What was what was sort of the evolution from where you started to what you're doing now?
Yeah, so I mean, if you want to go way back, I'm like child of immigrants. My parents moved here in the late '60s from Italy, like the full, spaghetti and meatballs on Sunday. Like my nonna lived upstairs, speaking Italian at home. So, but
That's awesome.
I was like, yeah, I mean, I was always a pretty good student and pretty active, and had whatever you want to call ambition is when you're that young. But um, I think for like as like an immigrant kid growing up, a lot of the like focus from the parents and relatives was always like become a professional, be a doctor, be a lawyer. It's kind of that traditional stuff that you might see in a lot of immigrant communities.
Hmm.
And I was lucky enough to be able to get into Harvard, and that sort of set me on a path of just getting into the professional world of some kind. And I ended up graduating and becoming a strategy and marketing consultant.
Hmm.
Um, which coming out of Harvard is sort of a popular job that people do, and very, very great training for communicating, developing your ideas, being able to size up problems and reframe them for people. After that, I went to business school and grad school for engineering, and that was when sort of like the venture capital market was really starting to open up. It was the late '90s,
Hmm.
and I became an associate at a venture capital fund. It was a new fund. I joined in like August of '99. They were doing a lot of internet deals, and then in March of 2000, the internet bubble exploded or imploded, and all of a sudden, I went from thinking, I'm going to work on these amazing deals and we're going to make all this money, to we have to do a bunch of workouts, and investors were literally running for the hills. Um, and I did that for that rolled into another firm where I did more growth equity deals, but I did that for about 15 years, and that's where I started to develop a point of view about management and what my better skills were, which were interacting more on the day to day with a business operation as like a real leader and problem solver. So once I kind of wrapped that up, and I decided I wanted to try my hand at helping to run a business or running a business, and I ended up becoming the CFO of a high growth consumer services company where I developed all of my CFO practice, but also like a lot of other leadership skills and things like that, and try to figure out how they fit into making people and a business successful. And then I started this business where I kind of like package all of that into, you know, um, usable frameworks that we can deliver in customized packages for emerging businesses like 3 to 100 million of revenue. They're all different. They all have different problems. They're all different people. Um, but thematically, we focus on three things, which is single source of truth of data, due diligence readiness, and equity value creation. You want to build value in your business. And those are the themes, but how you do that is different for every business, because some people have great accounting, some people have terrible accounting, some entrepreneurs know a little bit about finance, some of them are backed by their rich uncle, you know what I mean? Some of them have raised venture capital. So they all have different situations, and that you can't, it's not one size fits all, and you need to be really like thoughtful about who you're working with and really what their professional, personal, and business objectives are. And then you can really give them a good solution. So anyway, that's my arc. Hopefully that didn't take too long.
No, actually, I find it fascinating. A couple of things that you said. First of all, I think it's amazing, and I see this a lot, it's really a great sort of, I guess, evolution. But there's a lot of things that you did that some of them were deliberate and on purpose and positive. Some of them happened to you along the lines in your career, but they all culminate in something where you're able to take your experience, distill it down, and use it in a way where you can deploy it to help other people. And it helped you evolve into what you're doing today. And it's fascinating to me because even in my own career growth, there were a lot of things that I wouldn't have picked. I didn't necessarily expect or like at the time, and looked at them as obstacles or whatever. But then when I look back and I look at the things that I'm doing, I say, geez, I see how it all fits together. It does sort of tell a story. And I think that's really cool. The other thing is, I'm dating myself here too, but the .com thing, I'm no stranger to, because I'll tell you a funny thing. I was working for an IT consulting company in the city in New York in the late 90s. And we had
Okay.
consultants all over
All over,
in Santa Clara. We had them in New York. We
yeah.
had opened 3 new offices. We were a year away from IPO, and the .com bubble burst.
It wasn't Razorfish, was it?
What's that?
Was it
No, it
Razor?
was not. No,
Yeah.
it was a company called Taos.
Tout.
And yeah, we did system administration consulting. And when I started, I was the first hire in the professional services division on the East Coast. It was a West Coast Santa Clara based company, and they had grown to, it was privately held. They were really profitable. So they brought me on, and there were 3 of us in addition to the consultants in the New York office. That's it. We had a crawl space down on 110 Wall Street. I mean, I could spit and see, into the seaport, right? And the amazing thing is we had these exposed ceilings. We just wanted the address. Well, you fast forward a little bit. We had, over the next couple of years, expanded so much. We opened a bunch more offices. Our office internal staff grew to, I don't know, 15, 20. And we like had 5 or 6 times the number of consultants. We moved into the Chrysler building. Our CEO, his dream, he grew up in Brooklyn. He went to Brooklyn Polytech. And his dream was to have an office in the Chrysler building. Even though he was located in Santa Clara, he obviously came back home a lot and came to New York. And so we did. We got an office on the 63rd floor. It was amazing. And then just like that, the rug got pulled out from under
Yeah.
us. It was like, so crazy times. But it was really exciting. Some of the consultants took stock options and went places, and some of them worked out. A couple of them went to eBay. They got, super wealthy, and it worked out. Some turned down offers like that. And then some people, we had the paper millionaires that literally were mortgaged to the hilt. And when it crashed, they were totally bankrupt because
Right.
they were borrowing against stock that wasn't vested, and then it was worth like nothing overnight, So
Yeah. There was a lot of that happened back then. So
yeah,
I remember other people that happened to.
yeah, it was a wild, wild time. So in today's age, we live obviously in unprecedented times in some ways. Not the least of which, I mean, you got the advent of AI. I mean, it's absolutely exploded
Yeah.
just over the last 18 months or so, 2 years. So what do you see as the current state of things for entrepreneurs? And is it different than you've seen at times in the past?
Yes, definitely. I think that, just to go back to your IT system administration and the days of like companies like Razorfish and those guys, if you think about what it took at that time to spin up technology and applications compared to today, forget about forget about the AI piece. I'm just talking about even just leading up to where we are today, where there's widgets and tools for almost anything you can think of. And it's just a question of like, how much do you want to spend per month to get it? And there's choices too. So like, for example, if you look at these AI recorders for meetings, which I use one. I took 4 hours on a weekend. I tried like 7 of them, and then I found the one that was like totally perfect in my opinion. And now I don't even really take notes on calls because it creates the entire task list and summary for me, and I can click and send things out to my team. So those types of tools that really allow you to leverage your time better didn't exist back then. So I think for entrepreneurs today, they have an advantage to get to the state of product market fit or winning a new account more easily. Maybe not easily, but at least where they feel like the time that they need to commit to it can perhaps be a little bit more organized, because all of these ticky-tack things that are happening in the background, you've got little tools and such that can help sort of handle them. And that's very different. So I think people can, if they're smart, they can leverage their time better. Now, if you think about with AI, that opens up a whole other opportunity, which is just maybe utilizing your time better on the fly. That's like a very basic use case where, I mainly use Claude. I have a subscription to it, but there's things that I'll have where I'm trying to figure something out, or I just want some quick answers. And I don't really use it for emails or anything like that, but I'll use it for like a simple use case might be, I've got like a table of data and I need to clean it in like Power Query, and I don't want to hand it off to one of my analysts and wait. I'll have Claude just write me the code that I can use in Excel, and it'll just do it for me, like that. And then I can go on to the next thing, because I really want the answer at that point in time. Like, I made some time. Let me just figure this out. So that just gives you a lot of leverage, in your day. And it's not perfect, and you have to check what it does. But there are a lot of things that it does quite well, which is just an extension of all these widgets and tools that are out there that make your professional life easier.
Yeah, no doubt. One of the things that I find that's fascinating is the number of times that you'll have a problem with something, and historically, you had to sort of figure out, okay, how can I solve this? And then occasionally you might stumble on a tool where you'd say, oh, wow, this will actually do it for me.
Right.
Nowadays, when you have a problem, you start off by looking at what tools already exist.
Yeah.
Because chances are there's something out there for it, right?
100%.
And so I guess for better and worse, because we've taken away a lot of the administrative things. So any sort of competitive advantage you could get in that realm is basically eliminated, right? Everybody has the opportunity to play on a level playing field with that. So it sort of distills things down really to your business and your value and what you can provide to the customer, how effectively you can deliver that. And I guess the one thing about it that makes it more complex, though, even in its simplicity, is the fact that there's this race for automation and efficiency in a way where now, if you're behind on that stuff, even though you might have a better offering or something like that, you could be challenged by somebody who just has better systems in place because there's stuff that exists for everything.
Sure. 100%. And I think that for entrepreneurs who are really focused and sticking to their knitting and are successful in getting their flywheel turning in their business, they sometimes at this juncture of time, it's good advice to them to occasionally sort of step out of that and look at, are there things that you can add to the business that are very inexpensive and easy to implement that'll make things easier. Don't get trapped in things are going very smoothly, because I feel like the momentum and the speed with which your competitors can leverage some of these tools to kind of outgun you, it's like a creeping improvement by the competition, and you don't want to like let that creep up on you, and then 2 years later you realize like you have a whole lot of catching up to do with whatever efficiencies you want to introduce into the business. And I'm kind of being general, but it's think about a couple of the things that bug you, that you feel like you have to repeatedly do, that are not a great use of your time, and maybe put those on a list to try to like figure out how to get them off your plate. Because in this day and age, there's a lot of ways to do it that are inexpensive and quick.
Yeah, I actually think that's really great advice, because I'll tell you, I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, and I do a lot of coaching and things like that. And one of the things that I notice, and this is in particular for businesses where there aren't a ton of employees in the business, but I suspect it's probably the same anyway. They're so focused on the business and in the business that they rarely question, right? Pick their head up and question, why do we do things the way we do? Is there a better way to do it?
Right.
And to your point, I think that's a really, really important distinction, because in the old days, right, a disruptive technology would take a little bit of time to be able to
Yes.
overtake you. You might have an opportunity to look over your shoulder and see it and say, "Oh, I wish I noticed it sooner." But okay, we can get going now. Nowadays, the speed that things move at is just, I mean, it's astounding. And so you might never see it coming if you don't pick your head up and question what else is out there, because some of the tools, I mean, I know there's some manual processes I've done, and they're not things that are related, specifically to my survival as a business owner, but there's still things that were nagging, like you said, annoying. And I'm thinking to myself, geez, and I never thought about it because I was so busy just doing. And then eventually I got to a point of frustration enough where I said, okay, there's got to be a better. And I looked at him. The thing was right in front of me. If I had
Right.
just noticed it, I would have saved myself who knows how many hours each month, right, or each
Yeah.
week. So
Yeah. I've been there.
yeah, I think it's an important lesson, though, and it's definitely something nowadays people need to take into account. So in terms of metrics, I know in the financial world, a lot of stuff is driven by metrics. One of the most talked about, one of the most important, obviously, is customer acquisition cost. Can you just share, what exactly is that? And do you think that that's the most important for business success?
Okay. Yeah. So I do a lot of work in customer acquisition costs. Like, so part of my business is CFO Pro plus analytics, and we have a whole business intelligence capability that we bring to businesses that usually don't have anything in the form of analytics as part of the solution. Most clients are focused on the CFO stuff, and then they might add on analytics. But I've had a couple of instances where they start out with analytics and then they take CFO. That's not to say that you need to take both, but the analytics piece is very tied in a lot of instances to customer acquisition costs, and there's a reason for that. So so we have a lot of expertise in that. I personally do, and there's a few ways to kind of like talk through that. One is, I think, just empirically, if you just look at most businesses, The top three expenditures are going to be customer acquisition, R&D or building technology if they're in a technology business. And then the third thing is going to be just general personnel costs for service delivery and overhead. So it's always going to be, one of the top three. I generally find in most sort of digital native businesses, it's, number two usually. But it's also one that, gets varying degrees of focus, and also the time that it takes to do customer acquisition and analyze it is often not factored into the overall cost of the customer acquisition. So it's a big deal, right? And the way I look at it is, what's your marketing outreach cost plus your closing costs to close a transaction. And that includes everything to, if you're paying salespeople with commission and they've got managers and who get bonuses, I include all of that as part of the customer acquisition cost. Because what you want to do is you want to have like a full picture from the day you drop $1 in the marketing all the way to everything that it costs to manage, train, improve the performance of the closers. And you can make improvements at each layer of the funnel as it kind of goes through. And that gives you a lot of ability to pull levers in customer acquisition and not get stuck with, my SEO stinks, or like just having like the pet problem that you just can't figure out, which obviously is very important. But if you look at the whole range, there's a lot of other things that you also could be working on that might be easier to fix. Now, with that said, I would say always like try to focus on the thing that will have the most lever in it, where if you turn it, it's going to do a lot. But have a full picture so that you're not just stuck in something that is going to take a long time to fix, because there's other things that you might be able to improve more quickly. Now, if you're in a customer acquisition funnel where there are no human closers, and let's say you're just selling like a digital subscription widget online, like one of these AI note takers, right? Then your funnel kind of goes to the conversion point, and you're really looking at all of the steps that the consumer or this professional buyer is going through, and kind of where they get stuck and where you can improve. And then figuring out how do you do retargeting and remarketing to them, because the people that make it far through the funnel are really going to be very likely to buy at some point, and you really want to make sure that you keep track of those. But so the funnel, I look at it generically, but for different businesses, it's going to go a certain length to a certain length. There's some that might be even longer than that. But not to go too much further in a monologue, but the measurement really matters then, is like, okay, how much did it cost to get the person all the way through? And then now that they're closed and you have a successful outcome, what are you charging them, and what gross margin are you going to make on that, so that you can demonstrate that you've got money to recycle back in and do it all over again, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Because if you don't know that metric, how do you know what you can spend to get customers, and how do you know how much you're going to be able to make? You obviously, what you make has to be higher than what you spend, or you don't have a viable business.
Right.
And I think it's amazing to me, because you hit on a couple of things there that I think are really important, and understanding the entire cost, even things you might not consider as part of the cost. When you look just specifically, okay, well, we spend this much on an ad, and we spend this much on the person's commission percent. Well, yeah, but that's not the whole picture, Because if there's other pieces in there, like you said, managers, bonuses, any other element that goes into that, those don't exist in a vacuum. They've got to be allocated somewhere. And so if you then have that all wrapped together and you have that one bottom line, now you know you're at least playing with data that in a way where you know whether you can create a model that's scalable and a model that is going to work long term. And I suspect that from a financing standpoint, that's going to be something that everybody's going to want to know before they're going to open a checkbook and write you a check to be able to say, yeah, here, take this. We believe that you're going to be able to grow your business.
Yeah, I would say on the fundraising piece, having been an investor and having also raised capital, there's nothing more. I mean, maybe there are some things that are more powerful, but in an investor discussion, there's almost nothing more powerful than you have your customer acquisition costs locked down with all of the puts and takes and risks, and you just know them. And when you're talking to the investor and the investor says, well, you know, how's, you know, how are tariffs going to affect you, right, in customer acquisition cost? And you can have a really simple answer which is like, well, in my e-commerce business, I'm importing everything from Vietnam, which they may not know, and that's going to be unaffected. Or, yeah, I'm bringing stuff in from China, but it turns out that my products, don't have enough steel in them to really fit into the 33% tariff. It's really 10%. Oh, and by the way, when you roll the 10% through, here's what happens. It's going to lower my conversion rate by this amount because I'm going to raise my prices. And that's just an example, right? The idea is, what I'm trying to convey is really have an understanding of the mechanics, and the more you can articulate them, the more confidence you build in whatever investor you're talking to. It's really a highlight moment in a conversation with an investor if they can walk away feeling like, wow, these guys really understand how their funnel works all the way to conversion, and how they're going to be able to move with the changing dynamics of the market around them.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. So the general idea of finance, I know the whole idea when people hear the word, it scares the people. I know even in college and in grad school for me, the whole finance thing intimidated a lot of my classmates who weren't in it. They thought, oh, you're a finance major. Oh, you did. And I always found that really funny. But at the same time, what would you say to people about the importance of finance if there's somebody who feels intimidated by the idea?
Yeah, I think that if you're intimidated by it, think of it as really an enabler of being able to look forward in your business and be able to plan out, even if it's as simple as like what's going to happen in the next 90 days. And in a very fundamental way, that could just be like a weekly cash flow forecast. That's finance with your accounting system kind of embedded in it in a certain way, but it really is like a very just basic building block. That's sort of the simplest example of being able to look forward. But if you're if you go one step beyond that, then you start thinking about, okay, I need like a 3-year plan. And my 3-year plan really is not just for me, but it's also for some audience that I have in the future, which could be a lender, a venture capital investor, a private equity fund that wants to come and invest in the business. It could be one of your competitors that is looking to consolidate your market and you'd be a good asset for them to buy. That's what finance enables. So if you feel intimidated by it, recognize that, oh, this is actually going to become a really big asset. And with the right finance partner at your side, it should be pretty easy to execute. It's not, in fact, I would say, like, customer acquisition is way harder than finance, in my opinion. And I know a lot about customer acquisition, so I think I'm making like a fair comparison. It's not like I don't know what's over there, so I'm afraid of that. No, I love customer acquisition, but I feel like that's way harder than finance. Finance may raise questions that are difficult to answer or present big challenges, but it's better to know that than not, you know. So
Yeah,
that would be
agreed.
my
I mean,
advice.
I think that's great advice. I think that really simplifies it. I think it makes it really approachable. And I think it makes it something that's more, you can look at with more positive anticipation than fear. I
Yeah,
think, that for a lot of people, if you're not a numbers person, or if the concept of finance is intimidating, I think that's a really good way to look at it, because it's what it can empower you to do and what it can ultimately mean for you down the road.
yeah.
So you
And
work
actually,
with
I just add one quick thing to that
sure, yeah,
too.
go for it.
I see this in my fractional CFO business with uh, some companies, which is their initial thought is like, oh, this finance function is really like a cost center, and I'm going to spend money on this. But if you're thinking of that as you're listening to this podcast, and then you just remember like, oh, this guy Sal just talked about this whole customer acquisition funnel, right, in like great detail. And by the way, I'm just giving you like a 5-minute overview. If I showed you like some of my models on customer acquisition costs, I think you'd be, really impressed with like how deep you can go. But your finance person, if they're really good and effective, is enabling the money making all around the business, right? So they should be opening up opportunities for improvement and change that comes to you sort of like expertly delivered, so that you can really make decisions about how and when you want to implement those things. And therefore, the concept that it's a cost center really is a short-sighted way of looking at it, because it should be enabling you to do a lot more, better, faster, and cheaper.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's an excellent framing of exactly how to look at it, because I think it takes it from something that's maybe intimidating or scary, or something that would create anxiety, and make it into something that's more desirable and an opportunity, which I think ultimately, um, look, every aspect of our business, the better we know it, even if it's ugly, it's still better to know it, because if you know it, you could do something about it. You can make changes. You could do what you need to do. If it's black box, if you aren't aware of what it is, that's where you get into trouble, because you don't know what you don't know. And so
Exactly.
I think that's a really great way to frame it. So in working with a lot of businesses, you must have, I mean, obviously you've seen a lot of mistakes. Are there particular big mistakes that you see companies make or entrepreneurs make regarding funding or finance?
Yeah, I think that going to market for fundraising unprepared, um, or especially when it comes to equity, thinking that it's potentially a DIY opportunity. And I'm not talking about earlier stage venture backed companies, because that's a whole ecosystem in and of itself. And those folks are meant to sort of DIY it, it's all part of the process. But I'm talking about more founder owned businesses that are looking to raise equity. I think you need to be prepared. Um, and this is not just to raise money, but also potentially if you want to sell your business. Like, I'll give you sort of an example of a situation that I came across where it was a services business that had been around for like 40 years. It was very profitable. The owner, and I'm talking, like $10 million of net income a year kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Great target for lower middle market private equity. Founder was probably like 70. kids didn't want the business, never had a CFO. His senior accountant was someone who had been with him all the way along. It was like December, wants to hire a banker. Accountant hasn't closed the book since March, but it doesn't really matter because the cash flow in the business is fantastic. So he's, the bank account keeps filling up. So who cares if the books are closed? And the banker comes in and says, wow, I'm going to need like 6 to 9 months to just even be able to put a presentation together for this, because there's not enough resources in the company. You haven't closed the books. How do I build a story around this? Like, what's the information that we're going to use to storytell around this? And the entrepreneurs sort of get a number in their head of what they want to get out of it, but they need to understand that number becomes justifiable and maybe even higher than you think when you have all these other pieces in place. And so you need to be prepared, and that takes time and it takes expertise. And if you want to hire a great lower middle market banker to sell your business, showing up prepared is going to give you the ability to really choose the best banker, who then is going to be able to find you great investors. So I think that's one mistake, and it's just the nature of being an entrepreneur and running really fast for a long time. Maybe not hitting a lot of obstacles along the way, so you don't have to like course correct and like figure stuff out. So it's not like it's only to their detriment at the point where they need to do something with an outside audience. Then it becomes a problem, and the longer you let it linger, the more difficult and challenging it becomes to be able to, get to the other side with this investor audience. I would say another thing that I find is that founders in these businesses, one mistake is they hire fast and fire slow, where it should be the other way around. I often tell entrepreneurs, like when we put together a forecast for them, was like, hey, one of the things that's like your safety net in this model is that your expenses are probably going to be slow compared to the projection. So if your revenues are slow, we do have a built-in safety net, because it always takes longer to spend the money. And one of the reasons is that you get them into a mindset of like, when we hire people and we're adding staff, we're going to hire really the best people we can find, and that takes time. And you're better off waiting to hire the best person, and then work quickly to remove your lowest performers. That's another thing that I think they don't. Sometimes they have that locked down because it's just their nature, but most of the times they need a little bit of help in that area, and we definitely get involved in that.
Yeah, I can see that, because especially if you are an entrepreneur and you have a business and it's profitable, right? You have a tendency to overlook some things that if you were bootstrapping or if you were struggling, that maybe you would look at things with a little bit more critical eye. You'll let slide because there's food on the table. You're not concerned about paying the bills. And so I've always been a big believer in systems and efficiency, because what I think a lot of people overlook is, as you scale, those things don't get smaller, they get bigger. If you have lots of waste, if you have inefficiencies, those things magnify, and then they can become big problems if you have things that are leaky in the business. And so, I had heard that, and I don't know if this is, your opinion, I guess it would depend on the size of the business, but I had heard that really what you want to do is start preparing a couple of years before you're even
Yes.
thinking of potentially exiting or needing funds, because then you're prepared. And like you said, you're not then in a situation where you're pressured into making bad decisions or taking the first offer or whatever else. You have options, and you're in a situation where you could be proactive about it, as opposed to, look, I'm looking to retire today. Who wants to write me a check? Okay, I'll take the lowest bidder. So um, I think that's an important distinction as well. So types of funding. I just want to cover this a little bit. A lot of people, if you just ask them from a general perspective, there tends to be a negative sort of feeling and connotation or idea about raising debt. People don't like the word. It's a dirty word. It's 4 letters, like other words. Um, they'd much rather just get equity or have somebody give them money that they don't have to pay back directly. But from your perspective, is it really better to do that, or is debt financing actually better?
So the way I break it down for entrepreneurs is uh, permanent capital versus um, transitional capital, for lack of a better word. Permanent capital is equity and long-term debt. So, for example, if you can get an SBA loan, I view that as, yes, you're going to be paying interest on that, but hey, when they give you 30-year terms, that's pretty permanent. um, Equity is also permanent, except obviously your investors, especially if they're professional investors, they're going to need to have some sort of exit horizon. And yeah, there are instances where you can work with like a family office or someone like that who really has like a 10-year horizon and they just take the long view. There's definitely that type of capital definitely exists. It's usually very specifically allocated with targeted strategies. So you shouldn't just think like, oh, I'm going to go look for that, because you'll find six people and they probably none of them are interested in what you're doing. But the so if you think about it as permanent and transitional capital, that gives you the ability to frame it based on your business needs, right? So a good example of transitional capital for, say, like if there's any e-commerce listeners out there who manufacture goods and sell them through e-commerce channels, is what are called ABL loans, asset-backed loans, which is get some leverage on your receivables. If you hold inventory and you're not just doing drop shipping, get some leverage on your inventory, where the lender is lending you based on your assets. That is kind of, it's permanent capital because your assets are always coming in, but there are certain limits to it, because if you grow very quickly, you're going to run out of headroom there, and then you're going to need to solve it with something else. And your profits can be one way to help solve that, and then you get a bigger facility. But generally, like, you're probably going to get stuck at some point, and you're going to need to raise some equity in that situation. So as you think about your business, just think about like, okay, if I raise this type of capital, how far does it get me? And is it transitional or is it permanent? And then you can make a decision, like if you can keep spinning the transitional capital where you're paying interest, you're potentially paying principal payments, and it's taking money out of the business, but you can keep growing. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, it's cheaper. You get to deduct the interest for tax purposes. There's advantages to it. So I don't view it as like a dirty word in that perspective. If you're, but if you run that scenario and you realize, wow, at a certain point I'm going to get stuck, then you want to balance out like how good does my business look now versus that initial debt the end of that initial debt financing, and at what point do I need to start talking to a source of permanent capital like an equity investor, and at what point in that cycle am I going to be able to show them the best picture of my business, because that's when you really want to be able to talk to them, and you do need to plan ahead for that, right? You can't just go through the cycle of the debt raising and then wake up one day and say, oh shoot, I need equity, I need to go raise it now. You need to like have planned in advance for doing that. So I don't view one as better than the other. I think if you frame it as permanent and transitional, it gives you a different way of thinking about it as you're growing your business.
Yeah, I mean, it obviously makes sense that it would be situational. So I think it was important. I'm glad you shared that because I know just, in talking with people, the general perceptions, people associate, if you think about debt and you think about it from a personal or consumer perspective, it's not the same thing as when
Right,
you're using it for a business because there's an end game and it's leverage to allow you to be able to grow and create something bigger. And so that's where I think there's a big difference. It's not indulgent spending, I guess, right? As
right.
opposed to what we think about when we think about personal debt. Oh, you're buying things you can't afford. With a business, there's operating costs that you have to be able to cover. You
Yeah,
have to be able to invest and grow. Otherwise, you're capped, you're limited, and you can never get beyond a certain point. And so yeah, I think that that's an important point as well. So if we break away from the numbers for a minute and we just look at business through a different lens, what impact do you think company culture has on success and growth?
yeah. I think it has a lot of impact, and um, it's a topic that I think needs to be sort of like thematically built into the business, usually like from the leadership level of the entrepreneurs and founders who started the business. Um, and they need to put some thought into how that plays into their business over time and how they're going to sort of institutionalize that. Um, and there's a lot of demands on their time, and that's one of those things that can sort of fall by the wayside. But I think that if you do make a concerted effort to put some time into it consistently, it does sort of build on itself. It may start out a little slowly, and then pick up some momentum over time. But as long as you've got something in place that's related to building your culture, establishing like what kinds of people do you want to hire, what's the mission of the company and how does everybody rally around that. These are like basic things that you want to just keep in mind, and what your core values are, and then adhere to them. Stick to them. Don't deviate from them, because uh, if you've got limited budget and time to work on culture, the easiest thing you can do is stick to what you said it is, right? And be consistent there, because if you don't have a lot of time and effort to put into it, and at least being consistent helps maintain the messaging and sort of like the perception with your employees that, yeah, hey, these are people who mean what they say what they do what they say, and we understand exactly what we're trying to do. That's just an important baseline, and it doesn't cost you anything, right?
Yeah, I think that's really important because if you just put a sign in on the wall and it has a list of things, and then in your daily practices none of those things mean anything, then it doesn't mean anything to anybody. I've worked in organizations on both ends. I've worked in places where all the sort of they had all the buzzwords, right? They did all the things that you're told to do for a business, but none of it was real. They just they just flew by the seat of their pants and did whatever they needed to do. There was very inconsistent values. There was very inconsistent, even the personalities of the people they would hire. You would get one person who was like tyrannical, and then someone who's, and what ends up happening is you generate this culture almost by accident of chaos where nobody's happy and your high performers won't stay. Then I've been in organizations where, like you said, from the top down, everybody lives whatever those values are. So even if when you come in the door, you're cynical about it because you feel as though, oh, I've been in a company before where the values were just a joke. As soon as you start to see other people do it, it sort of raises everybody's game. You start to realize, geez, that's the way things get done around here. And all of a sudden, you don't want to let anybody else down either. And you don't want to deviate from it. And you feel sort of, you buy into it as well. If you don't, you'll leave because those are the values that they espouse and they clearly live by them. And I think um, the ability to create something that's greater than the sum of its parts has so much to do with culture and the way that people feel about where they work. There are people that will go above and beyond. There are people that will do whatever they need to do to help the organization grow when they feel as though there's integrity there, when they feel as though there's values that the people in the organization are valued, and you project that out to your customers as well. So yeah, I fully agree. I mean, I know from my own personal experience, the amount of the impact culture can have, both positively and negatively, can be very, very significant. And I mean, if I were investing in a place, I'd certainly want to invest in a place that I felt I would want to work if if I
Sure.
was in that situation. So that makes total sense. All right. So where can people find you, find your products, services, connect with you?
Yes, my website is a good place to go. There's good content on there, some calculators and tools for entrepreneurs to use. It's cfoproanalytics.com. And I also, I've got a variety of blog articles there about sort of more business related issues related to finance and entrepreneurs. And then I've got a personal blog where I write more kind of analytics topics for more general audiences, where I get into like different sort of details about how sort of things work analytically, things that you can think about, some efficiency hacks, that type of stuff. And that's at tirabassi.com, which is my last name.com. And yeah, feel free to reach out. We always like talking to entrepreneurs and hear about their businesses. And, even if it's just a 20-minute chat where we can just give them some free advice, we're happy to talk to people and see how we can help them out.
Excellent. Thanks for that. All right. I have one last question I have to ask because I always want to know what everyone's going to say. That's, what's your number one tip for success as a business owner or an entrepreneur?
My number one tip is wake up early and check your calendar before you brush your teeth.
I love that. That's so funny. You're the first person that's ever said wake up early, but I actually find that to be incredibly relevant and great advice, because I can say definitively for myself, I'm not a great morning person by default, but I've become one because I've realized the power of getting up early and getting things done. You get into the middle of your morning, you've already accomplished things. That momentum carries you
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
through the rest of the day. You just feel great all day. You're firing on all cylinders.
Yeah.
When everything's sort of lazy and slow in the morning, same thing. It sets a bad tone for the rest of the day. It's hard to pick up and get going. So excellent, very timely advice there.
Yeah.
All right. So it's just about time to wrap things up. I want to thank you again so much, Sal, for sharing all your insights, great tips with us. Visit cfoproanalytics.com to explore the transformative power of strategic CFO insights and how these insights can elevate your business performance. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And as always, remember, No matter what you want from your business and your life, don't compromise, optimize.